Welcome everyone. So my name is Dee Woods and I am the Food Justice Policy Coordinator at the Land Workers Alliance, and part of my work has been around building the UK food sovereignty movement and sort of for us to start countering some of the corporate capture that's happening within sort of national and global food governance, but also for us as people and as a movement to sort of build food sovereignty. And I'm going to share my screen. All right, so food sovereignty. I don't know what's wrong with this. All right, so I'm abandoning this. Right, so food sovereignty is us as people having the right to control our own food systems and to be able to decide where our food comes from, who produces that food, and where we access that food, and ensuring that we are creating just food systems. And in June this year, we held a People's Food Summit where we looked at all the issues around food that are affecting us here in the UK. We looked at the food group and history of UK food group. We looked at the food sovereignty movement. We looked at issues of inclusivity and lack of inclusivity and ways forward. So today what we're planning on doing is taking some of those things forward by looking at particular groups, particular issues, and starting to build strategies for our food sovereignty movement. And we have 3 members of the movement. So we have Emma Eberhardt from Flame. We have Kemi Atijosan from the African and Caribbean Heritage Food Network, and Dublin, not Dunlin as it was on the program, Dublin from the African and Caribbean Heritage Food Network, and Black Butterfly. So we'll switch over to Emma, who has a brilliant presentation and hopefully will have more success than me with her slides.
Okay, so just quickly going to start by presenting myself. So I'm Emma. I'm a new entrant in land work, working in coppicing and horticulture in Cornwall. I'm studying towards a master's in agroforestry and food security with the University of Bangor, and I'm on the coordination team for Flame and ECVC Youth, which I'll talk about more later on in the presentation. So I'm going to be talking about youth in the food sovereignty movement. So when we're talking about food sovereignty, we're talking about empowering food producers and people to govern their own food systems. And relating that to young people means giving young people the right to have an affordable living from agriculture and have agency over what they produce. But it also means that young people should have a right to access local and nutritious food. And so many children in this country are living under food poverty. Young people are one of the groups which are marginalized by the corporate capture and industrialization of our food systems. Access to land is incredibly difficult for young people, but also there is a lack of training and startup costs are very high and there's little support for that. Young people's voices are often not included or listened to in decision-making processes on a national scale and international. So not only in the food movement, but also, for example, in the recent climate discussions at COP26. And as a result of lack of support, small-scale agroecological farms, which are often family-run, are disappearing, and new entrants are facing a multitude of barriers, which makes it very difficult for young people to enter the sector. And this comes to the detriment of food security and food sovereignty. So why do we need young people? Well, we don't only need young people because they are the future workforce, and we need young people to work the land if we want to have a localized food system, but also young people are really invested in the future of food and farming because it is their future. And young people are quite likely to take up agroecological methods because it aligns with their values to do with nature and climate. Young people also have lots of energy and new and fresh ideas to bring to the movement. And if this is combined with the knowledge of older generations, then this can bring about huge changes. To survive the climate crisis, we need a movement which is dedicated to ending the influence of corporations over agriculture and politics, and the promotion of truly sustainable farming methods which are not based on the exploitation of people and nature. And for that, I believe we need young people. The UK has to encourage and support the entrance of new farmers if it wants to guarantee food security for the years to come. This is not a moral duty, but a crucial necessity. We need a longer term perspective and a change of paradigm for the future of agriculture. So I'm just quickly going to talk about two groups now which are trying to tackle these issues. So FLAME is a union of 16 to 25-year-olds supported by the Land Workers Alliance, whose main aim is to create a different agricultural reality where people can access healthy and affordable food from local food producers, and where land-based workers can work with dignity and earn a decent living, and where farming regenerates our planet. Our three principles are food for all, youth involvement, and promoting agroecology. And we do this by providing support via educational resources, farm visits, trainings, and socials. We recently received funding from Farming the Future project, which will enable us to deliver some online resources and trainings for young people to start making the links between the climate and nature crises and the importance of agroecological farming and food justice. So ECVC Youth is part of ECVC, which is the European Coordination of La Via Campesina, which is a grassroots organization representing farmers and rural organizations in Europe. And its main objective is to defend farmers and field workers' rights, as well as promote diverse and sustainable family and peasant farming. So ECVC Youth is engaged with regional and international agricultural policy processes where it can, such as the European Parliament public hearings, the civil society mechanisms in the Committee on World Food Security of the UN, and European Commission civil dialogue groups. We're currently engaged with Coventry University to do some research on the youth exploitation in agriculture. So this is to gather data on the experiences that young people are facing working in agriculture, to have some data that we can push for in our policy advocation. And we've also recently submitted a claims for new entrants in the Common Agricultural Policy, which is relevant for European Union countries. And that's it from me.
Thank you, Emma. So we'll go on to Kemi now.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this session this afternoon. My name is Kemi Atijosan. I'm one of the directors of African Caribbean Heritage Food Network. The organization was set up in 2020 at the start of the pandemic, when both Dee and myself realized that there is no voice for the African people in our public food system here in the UK. As Emma has said in her presentation, food sovereignty is critical to the survival of humanity, whether it's the general population or the African heritage people. But particularly, why do we need a movement for the African heritage people? It's important for the African heritage people to reclaim the knowledge and tradition of their community that provided stability and cohesion to our communities. The way we farm, the liberty that we have over the source of our food has been important to us for generations. And as big corporations take over and commercialize and commoditize our food, we have lost most of those things that we used to enjoy and take for granted. And if, as a people, we're going to survive and control and have liberty over our food, then it's critical that we have a food sovereignty movement that is inclusive of the African people and what we stand for. We need to ensure that we have liberty over what is fed into our bodies to maintain and sustain us as a people. Without that liberty over our food, where it comes from, how we grow it, we will have lost everything that sustains our health. Our bodies are not built to have food that destroys us. Food is meant to sustain us and to keep us alive. But more and more, everything that we have in the market is destroying our immune systems. And if we do not have sovereignty over our food, how it's grown, and return to those traditions that we have, our health will be completely destroyed. We need to ensure that generations to come have a sense of dignity and connection to their ancestry and how they maintain their health and the resilience of the communities. Many of the traditions we have grew around food, around how we work together as a community, how we farm our land, how we share our resources. And not having that, corporations taking over, introducing the monoculture that has destroyed the biodiversity that we have in our system, has meant that the food chain is broken. And what we're now experiencing is serious health issues that we never used to have. Cancer is rampant, diabetes is killing people. And surely we all know, whether people want to accept it or not, that if you don't have genetic disease, the rest disease that humanity suffers is related to food or the environment in which they are in. And so having the Black sovereignty movement means that we will be able to reintroduce all the traditions and systems that have been lost. It's going to be hard work, and it needs all of us working together, collaborating globally, nationally, and regionally in order to ensure that food sovereignty movement, as it's growing, we're all working and sharing the knowledge that we gain and moving forward together. So we will be having a series of education, because that's where it starts. Education is critical in this movement. People need to connect the dots. We can fight climate change all we like, but if we're not willing to move from our convenient position to accept that our actions are all interwoven, and what is convenient for me may be down the line destroying somebody else's environment, then we are, as human race, we are heading for doom. And so the Black sovereignty movement will be working with the rest of the world to ensure that the diverse culture that we need to have within our food system is maintained and restored. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kemi. You've made some really important points, as has Emma, and these are things that we'll look at in more detail later. Dawn?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really grateful for Dee and everyone else for creating this space, and to all the participants for joining on a Friday afternoon. So yeah, my name is Dawn Dublin. I'm from an organization called Black Butterfly, but I work collaboratively with a lot of other organizations. Black Butterfly, a bit like the African Caribbean Heritage Food Network, was set up during the height of the pandemic, so early 2020. I was already working with another large mutual aid organization and realized that we were still excluding lots of different voices. I worked with a few other colleagues, and we went about setting up Black Butterfly to center the voices of Afro-descendant communities, starting where I live in Hastings, but we also work in London and now internationally. I guess it's really tricky for us because we're a new organization. And so we've had to face a lot of barriers, especially because of issues with COVID, and there was a focus on supporting organizations that existed. But our main focus was always to use our ancestral knowledge and our lived experiences of exclusion and the culture and the joy of our communities to try and ensure we were still supporting our community. And I say this sort of ancestral knowledge because what I do is based on what my parents did and what my grandparents did. And I'm creating the legacy for my children. And I know for lots of other people who have still kind of disconnected with some of that ancestral knowledge. So we run a number of different programs, and one of them, particularly Joyful Roots, is based in sort of agriculture and food sovereignty, food justice and food security. So through Joyful Roots, we have gone about trying to shine a light on not necessarily the facts of what people need, but what's missing. The exclusion of certain groups of people and the lack of diverse foods and diverse cultural food for certain communities. So we provide, one of the projects that we started with Joyful Roots was an organic veg bag scheme, and we provide culturally relevant organic produce. We supply a lot of that locally. It's grown locally, and that's another one of our projects, but we also obviously buy in stuff that's international, because obviously at the moment we can't grow mangoes and bananas and things in this country. Nevertheless, it was really important to us to make sure that we were trying to source things that were natural, but that were very relevant and pertinent to certain communities. So it's not for us just in the Black community. We support a lot of people because we're a coastal community, so we have a lot of people who are displaced, sort of have migrant or refugee status. So we provide a lot of different programs around, cooking together and knowledge sharing and storytelling, and making sure that we're trying to create inviting spaces so people can, as we say, our tagline with Joyful Roots is that we're a growing community, that we grow together, and in every sense of the word. But what we're also doing within Black Butterfly is trying to work out what are the other issues and the barriers that mean that there's a need for food sovereignty. Like we're using food sovereignty, there's a reason we have to have it. And part of it is linked to the things that have already been said by Emma and by Kemi. And, it's part of this whole big food sovereignty movement that sort of, Dee sort of works in as well. It's just that this should be a right. We shouldn't have to fight for this. We shouldn't have to talk about food justice. It's a right. And understanding and valuing the knowledge and the growing practices and the culture from all of these different groups around the world is so important. That's the diversity, that's the inclusion. We say those words, diversity and equality and inclusion, but we're not really practicing them enough. So we end up having these fights, the food justice fight, the racial justice fight, gender inclusion, whatever it is. And I guess part of what we're trying to do is change those norms, the norms that have put corporations in charge and people who use lots of pesticides, you know, getting lots of subsidies, as opposed to organic and cultural and heritage, and valuing those things more and prioritizing them. And I think that part of what we do is to try and shift all of that to kind of change the norms from what they are currently, which is all very flawed, to something actually that makes more sense and is centered, for me, is definitely centered in Afro-Indigenous theories, but I guess it's just the same in lots of other very Indigenous sort of cultures, and that we just go back to what we were doing before this idea of money and power and convenience came along, like growing as we should do. And so I guess that's the basis of what we do.
Thank you, Dawn. I think you hit the nail on the head. Our quest for convenience, the issue of power and control, and who holds that power within our food system. You know, those are the things we're really dealing with. So we have a bit of time to take a couple questions, and then we'll move in to 3 breakout rooms where we want to start sort of strategizing. Let's start brainstorming about those strategies, and then I'll give a quick update as to the next steps following this. So, any questions? Okay, yes, Black farmer, heard of him, not really conducive to the food sovereignty movement. He has done some work around sort of diversity and inclusion, but I think the other aspect of this work right now is that, you know, we're facing so many threats to our lives, our livelihoods, that we need to be building solidarity, and building solidarity probably with people we wouldn't necessarily build solidarity with. Okay. So we have a question for local food strategies. What advice can speakers give to those trying to bring together local communities to create a local food strategy?
I can, just from the experience we have, we are part of a food network where we're based, but it's a local food partnership, but it's not very much of a partnership. So we are involved, but we're not also involved just because, yeah, there are just some issues with it. So our strategy, I guess, that we're sort of co-creating with some other local farmers and some other groups, has been to work to source premises and land where we can. So the land, that's just, we've been working with the local farmers, organic farmers, and then also working with some schools to convert some of their disused land into food growing spaces so that they can then infuse the education, the curriculum into those spaces. But we also sourced a few different empty buildings. So we had started doing that at the beginning of 2020, and then the pandemic hit, and it sort of made it a bit easier to source and acquire some of the empty buildings. So we have a warehouse building that we've turned into a community hub and a community garden, and also storage for small enterprises. We have also got a former betting shop that's being turned into a community kitchen, and we'll run it for workshops and training as well as meetings. And then we have secured a rooftop car park to turn into an urban farm. So it's in the center of the town. And these three things work together. We're working with lots of different groups because they needed spaces and we now have spaces. But so they're now engaging with us a bit more, but also with the groups that which we were working already. So we're kind of creating a sort of shadow sort of network, but it's part of a wider food strategy about inclusive sort of food networks and resilience building and partnership building. So I think it's just kind of, just talking to different people who are out there, seeing who connects, if they have the same type of thinking. It's just looking around and seeing who's there, but also looking at the spaces that are around and trying to rather than see them as barriers, try and work out, well, how can you access those spaces? And I always look for the ones that no one else wants generally. And we try to turn something from nothing, we try to make something amazing out of nothing. So I don't know if that helps, but that's how we've done it so far.
I think it's very important that people who are on the same network have shared objective. Doesn't have to be exactly the same objective, but if people don't have the same objective, have a shared objective of what you're trying to work towards, then you will spend all your time arguing and fighting over things that are not relevant to the growth of the organization and the growth of the partnership. So I think the starting point is ensuring that you have a common goal, however wide those goals are, pick out the common threads so that you can work on those to knit together and be able to move forward. It's also important that you're very clear about where you are trying to go, where you're heading, and what the barriers could be, so that you look ahead and try and tackle those before you begin the journey, so that you have an expectation that there will be challenges, but those challenges can be overcome if you have kind of looked ahead and talked about it and try and work out a way forward or what you might do when those challenges arise.
I'd like to bring Emma in very quickly. As a young person, who probably hasn't been involved probably in sort of food governance issues, how would you go about sort of getting young people involved?
I know that for me, the main thing is just getting outside and doing your own growing projects. I think that really starts to make the link for young people between the food that they're eating and where it's growing, where it's coming from. And I think just even being able to have gardens in schools or in just patches of land around towns, and being able to start seeing those connections and learning about how food is grown. I think it should really be part of the educational curriculum, and also just from a mental and physical well-being point of view, being outdoors and meeting your local communities is really important for young people. And I think community growing projects have got a real potential for making those different links for young people, particularly if young people are involved with climate change campaigning, for example, and starting to make those links with, okay, how does this relate to the food movement, and what does food sovereignty mean, and why are we eating these sorts of food? So yeah, starting to engage with these questions by just putting your hands in the soil, really.
Okay, brilliant. So there's one more question, which I will answer because it'll, it's a good segue into our breakout rooms. Is there an explicit national food sovereignty network mapping and connecting of local groups, or is this more informally known? So right now we're very informal, and part of the work we want to be doing over the next few years is formalizing that and having regional groups. so that we can be more effective and that we're not just London focused or Southwest focused. So we're going to go into breakout rooms, one specifically looking around building strategies around youth participation and leadership, another around BIPOC strategies, and the last one, which Dawn will be leading on, which is looking at the intersections of various issues. So most recently COP26 and sort of food sovereignty. You know, how do these things relate? So we'll share a link in the chat and you should be able to go to a mural board. You don't have to sign up, and you choose the mural board that pertains to your group and just start talking and posting. We haven't had enough time to really get deeply into anything. So one, we're going to leave the mural board open for the next week. So people can contribute. We'll set up a page on the platform and we'll put that link in there, as well as other links and my slides that didn't work. And we have received funding to set up a secretariat and to host a series of events, and hopefully some of those events will be in person and in different parts of the country. If not, they'll be online. And we're also hosting a national gathering in September as part of a regional process for the European food sovereignty gathering, which should happen at the end of the year, and the international gathering next year. So thank you everyone for participating today. I mean, it's been really valuable and I look forward to working with a lot of you in the coming months. Thank you, everyone.